Okay, we're rolling.
And this is an interview at the Days Inn, Hicksville, New York, 3rd of August 2004, approximately 4:30 p.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, place of birth, please?
Richard Reeves, May 31st, 1949, Saratoga Springs, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I graduated from high school, did about a year and a half of college, got drafted, joined up.
Okay, so you were drafted then?
Yes.
Into the Navy?
No, I was drafted into the Army. I ran out of deferments, and so the day I got my draft notice, I enlisted.
Okay. All right, why did you select the Navy?
Why? Vietnam was going on, and I decided that jungle warfare wasn't my cup of tea. Plus, because of the location of where I come from, I was a little familiar with it because West Milton's very close to Saratoga, and my father had had some business dealings with a few of these guys, and they seemed a little bit cut above. So I wasn't doing anything. I was 19. Okay, I'll go join up. Plus, it got me out of going to Vietnam.
Okay, and I noticed both your father and grandfather had served in the Navy?
Yes, they're both electricians, same as me.
Okay. All right, where did you go for your basic training?
Great Lakes, and from Great Lakes, I went on a destroyer out of Boston for 5.5, 6 months. The Compton, DD 705. From there I went to nuke school, and then I went to West Milton. I had a car accident right at the end of West Milton. Ended up in St. Albans, and then at 90 Church Street in the city. That's where I met my wife.
Okay. All right, so after your schooling then you were assigned to the Archer Fish? That was your first?
Right. I went to that was my first permanent duty station, was here, Archer Fish.
How long were you on the Archer?
3 years.
All right, you want to tell us about your duties? What was your specialty on?
Well, I was an electrician, and we took care of electrical things. I was designated a nuke, so we took care of the electric plant for the ship, and also we, stood watches, especially when the reactor was shut down. You had to have a special qualification to be a reactor operator. But when it was shut down, we were allowed. There was a watch station going to shut down maneuvering area. We stood that in port. And then with 6 months to go, I did qualify reactor operator. They were very short on. Usually used electronic technicians for that, but there weren't any. You gotta remember this was 75, and it was the height of the Cold War. It was over 110 nukes then, and they were getting very low on people coming out of school.
Was that on-the-job training for you?
Yes, OJT. First, you go to nuke school for 6 months. It's a 6-year enlistment because you obligate yourself for all the school. They want something in return. So you go to nuke school. You have a specialty. You're an electronic technician, a machinist. Then you go to nuke school. Then you go to prototype, which is West Milton, and you learn the specialties of your watch area on the ship where you're going to be, and that's both for submarines and surface craft. Now I think the only surface craft that are nukes are carriers, but at the time they had some. I think the Truxton and the Bainbridge were cruisers, right?
You must have had to have a special security clearance too, didn't you? Must have been probably
Yeah, yeah.
difficult to get that.
Yeah, you needed I think all you had to have was, oh geez, if it's secret. Yeah. It's funny, my wife, eventually, after we got married, she worked for the Drug Enforcement Administration at the time, and when they had a kiddie cruise on the ship, that's right, she came, and a dependence cruise. They went out in the Long Island Sound, and so I asked my XO if nobody was allowed, none of the dependents were allowed back aft because they didn't have clearances. But my wife had a higher clearance than I did. The problem, it may be the XO, but he didn't want to cause any problems by having just one wife go back there, so there you go. But yeah, I think all you needed was really a secret, which I guess is something.
Could you tell us about your time on the Archer Fish? And
Well, I did 2 northern runs, and the northern run that's you go north of the Arctic Circle. 2 southern runs. That's where you go. We went down to the Caribbean area, and 1 med cruise. That was a 6-month job. We're in fact, if you've ever seen that, there was a book that came out, which, Blind Man's Bluff. Yeah, where my time, if you look at the back of it, they show you the unit citations, presidential citations. My time on the ship is in there. They don't specifically talk about what we did, but they show the. In fact, it was a little strange. About 3 years after I got out, I got 2 things in the mail from the Navy for unit citations, and I have no idea what they're for. I knew where we were and kind of what we were doing, but I was there to push the ship. That was my job. Provide hotel services for sonars and radars and radios and whatever else they were doing. And it was, kind of this, it was the middle of the Cold War, and they were doing Cold War type things.
are there any of those things you can talk about yet? Or
No.
they have in Blind Man's Bluff and
Yeah, if you
some
read,
other books.
if you read, well, yeah, but I don't know if with the litigation those people are. Yeah. No, one of the things we did was we took some whole, videotapes of Russian submarines while they were on the surface, while we were underneath them, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know what was going on until afterwards when we watched the videotape. And the captain we had, it was kind of like, the guy knew what he was doing, and which is good. That's a good thing to have.
Now, you said your captain became an admiral within a
Yes.
year, and you feel it's because of his
Oh, definitely.
competency?
That was what he did this one day. Definitely did not hurt his career at all. He ended up. I'm not sure where he is now. He was working for Boston Edison. He was vice president of nuclear engineering. That's where he was. That was the one job he had. The other guy, the XO, he became the CEO of Philadelphia Electric, which is now they joined with Commonwealth Edison. It's the largest utility in the United States. And that was his last. He retired right after those two merged. So they were a pretty competent group.
Did you ever have any direct contact with them, or?
Yeah, what happened was I wrote, the XO had he became chairman of this group of nuclear executives in that end of the utility business. And you know, when you're in the industry, you get all these publications, and he had written a paper, you know, and I just wrote him a thing. He never wrote back to me. I congratulated him on doing so good. I had my doubts about it. Nah, he was a sharp guy. He was a Long Island boy, though. He's from the Gold Coast on the North Shore there.
How true do you think Blind Man's Bluff was? Could you relate to
Yes.
a lot of the incidents in it?
Yeah. They, no, I did, yeah, I always, when I read something, and this as I get older, I always have to, especially if it's third party or second party, you know, you have to add a little, you know, license to the person that wrote it, you know. But yes, they probably caught the essence of what was going on. I mean, those were, I was a mere enlisted person, and I had to check every day where we were. They had a little chart up front, you know. But the scenery never changed for me. You know, if you're not the lead dog, you don't know what's coming up. And I think these officers they were all, they were aggressive. They were, good. They were hand-picked, most of them, and they willing to get recognition and also get the job done. They were willing to take some chances, and they did, and they were successful for the most part.
Were you ever aware, were you ever aware that you were within Soviet waters, or?
Once, I was a throttleman, and just running the main engines. And executive officer came back, and he says, "Hey, if you see speed dropping off, because I had the ship speed. That was one of the gauges I had. And also I had a gauge to tell you how many turns the main engines were making. He says, if you see ship speed drop off rapidly when the turns remain the same, I'm authorizing you to go to back emergency." That's a pretty, he's giving me control of the ship. So I said, "Well, what's that mean?" He says, "Well, that means we're going to hit an underwater mountain. We're in uncharted waters. There were no charts where we were. They didn't know how, they had a vague idea how deep the water was. But we had to go there because where we wanted to go, there was too many Russians. Physically where that was, I have no idea. I did see on Christmas Day, through the periscope, I did see Russian soldiers on a guard tower now. So we were pretty close. But those were pretty good periscopes, though.
If you went into places like that, was the crew ever notified? Given any specific instructions?
No. You would be, yes, they would go into a silent mode. You had to be very quiet. They would tell you that before you went in. And right before we went in, they did a self sonar inspection to see how quiet they were. So we kind of knew something was up. And there were certainly people, because I was in the engine room, there were enlisted people up front that knew exactly what was going on because they were, working hand in glove with the people that were doing it.
Did you ever have non-naval or military personnel on board?
Yes. Several times. Not on a northern run that I know of. We had, Navy has a group of people, they're known as spooks. And we would pick those up. They'd come on right before you left. and then they would get off as soon as you got back. And they had very sophisticated gear that even our own ships, like radio men, weren't allowed into their space when these guys were doing whatever they were doing in there. And
Did they stay with the crew, or were they segregated in a way?
No, they had berthing because there was the
Yeah, I realize
right.
it was something
But
like
they worked 12-hour shifts. They would, they'd watch movies with you. They'd have dinner with you. But they were kind of on their own. And most of the time they were either sleeping or working. I mean, there wasn't a lot of downtime for them. And these guys just do this over and over and over. I don't know how often they do it, but that's all they do. They take these northern runs, or I don't know what they call them on the Pacific coast, but these were in these took place in Murmansk area, in that the White Sea.
How long was the longest that you were under without surfacing?
79 days. That took place in the Mediterranean. My northern runs were like 60, I don't know, 60 and change, something like that. But this one time period it's funny, I just quit smoking a couple of months ago. But during that 79 days, I had to quit smoking too. Because we were only supposed to be out for 5 days, and it ended up being 79. So I ran out of cigarettes. You would think that would have been a clue. Hey, this is a sign. Quit now. But I didn't. As soon as I hit port, I got into a nicotine fit there.
Now, you said you found oftentimes your duties quite boring on board.
Oh yeah.
What did you do for entertainment?
Play cards, read. I probably could have got a college degree very easily, a correspondence course with the. You had maintenance work to do. There was a certain routine, periodic maintenance. But a lot of times we were just, depending on your watch schedule, you'd work 6, you'd have 6 off. You either 6 on, 6 off, or 6 on, 12 off. And then in that 12 off period, you would be doing, maintenance. If anything broke, you had to work on that, of course. But it was a pretty good running ship, so yeah, sometimes it got very tedious. Other times, it was exciting. But most of the time, it was, long periods of boredom, and all of a sudden it would get real exciting.
In what way?
Well, not so much when you were on, if you were doing a specific, they would, you were always in a flux of training, where they just go, an officer would come back and, turn off the reactor on you. And it would be your job as your crew to get the thing back running again and get permission. And in the commercial world, they don't do things like that because that costs a lot of money. And it didn't make a lot of sense because that reactor was the one thing you had going for you. It powered everything. It made your air, it made your light, made your heat, made your propulsion. And they just turn it off. Okay, what are you going to do now? And I have to admit, it was very good training. But I guess I had some confidence they could get it back.
Do you know if you ever shadowed Soviet submarines or surface
Oh yeah, that was
vessels?
a 78-day job. Yeah, yeah. The Mediterranean is very interesting topography-wise. You got that, Gibraltar. You got Africa, and you got Spain, and whatever goes in or out of the Mediterranean has to go through there, and you can just sit there and wait. And with God only knows what kind of sonars they have now, but back then you could just sit there and hear everything going through there. And we were told to go there, and we followed this Russian ship, submarine, all over the Mediterranean for almost 80 days. We're down to peanut butter and jelly. That's what we had.
Now, you said you found the crew highly motivated. Do you think submarine crews are
Oh yeah,
very highly motivated?
way beyond. I didn't spend. I was on a reserve tin can, so I can't tell you what a cruiser or anything else. But yeah, there is no choice but to be motivated because of you create your own environment, and if you're not motivated, that's not good. That's not good.
Now, you said during the Vietnam War you were off Vietnam, or were you off the coast of Vietnam at all, or
No,
some duty? No, you
no,
weren't
no.
during that
We
time.
we
Okay.
made a run where I got over just about to the Pacific, but we
Oh,
didn't.
okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
We said in there. Okay. Right.
Any effects from the radiation? I mean, did you have to
I got
periodically
less.
be?
I got less there than I did in my commercial career.
Mhm.
Per, if you broke it down a unit time, yeah, it's a pretty well designed setup there.
Okay. I guess. Do you think after serving, do you think do you regret going into the submarine service, or have any regrets, or?
No, no. My life after that was all based on skills that I learned in there. I mean, my job criteria. Now, it's very funny. I told you I met my wife when I had this car accident down in the city. And when I got out of the Navy, they were building a nuclear power plant on Long Island. And they were looking for me. It just worked out so perfectly. So I started there. I worked there 20 years. They ran it one day. They shut it down. It cost $5.5 billion. And they've never run it since.
What happened?
Politics.
Have you ever watched any of the? I know most of them seem to be about Soviet submarines. Any of the submarine movies at all? The
Oh, yeah.
modern submarine movies.
Yeah, what was the one there with the Tom Clancy movie there?
Hunt for Red October.
Right. Those guys are good, real good. They're a lot better than anybody I ever met. Although we did have if you remember, there was in the American submarine, there was a sonarman. It happened to be a black guy.
Denzel Washington played the part.
Yeah. And this guy could pick out things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had a chief on board that was kind of like him. Only he didn't have to be a black guy, but the guy could. He was good at what he did. He was very good, very good. But other than that, he was very dramatic. And we didn't do we didn't capture any Russian submarines.
I didn't think so.
Or anything like that. We didn't have Alec Baldwin, helicoptering on and stuff like that. Food was pretty good, I have to admit. That's one nice thing about submarines.
How were race relations like in the submarine? Were they allowed?
Well, it because of we had, was it maybe 100 people on board? And there was no black people, no minorities at all. In the engineering spaces, and there was maybe 3 black guys up front. All 3, while I was there, went on to officer, candidate, got into these do-gooder programs where they put them through school, brand name colleges, Michigan State and places like that. And yeah, there was there wasn't. I'm not sure if because of the numbers there wasn't a race problem, but I'll tell you the minorities that we had a couple of Hispanic guys too that seemed to do well, took well advantage of the opportunities that the service had.
Well, I
for
guess
them.
how were relationships like just in that confined area for such a long period of time? Were there ever any?
Oh yeah, there was people that didn't
Yeah.
like each other,
Yeah.
but they weren't. I can't remember any like fisticuffs or
Mhm.
anything like that.
Yeah.
Certainly not on board. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe a night out on the beach, you guys would get a little crazy with each other. But yeah, it was. I'm sure it's not like any other military unit. The platoon or the
Right.
the air group where and I'm certainly not. I just got done watching for the second time this Band of Brothers. I mean, we're nothing like them. Certainly nothing that a situation that would cause you to band that close together. But yeah, there was and I'm sure it happens. And as you guys take interviews like this, I'm sure you hear it too.
Okay.
These people we were very close at that given time.
Did you ever join any veterans organizations or any kind of submariner? You said you didn't join submarine.
No, my wife wanted to end as much of my. One of the reasons I got married, and I got married when I was in the service, which is not a good situation. But I got tired of playing sailor, and she got tired of me being a sailor. So, and then when I went to work out at the Nuke, it was just surrounded by, my work thing was my submarine buddies. About 2/3 of them were all ex-submariners where I was working. All Navy nukes, all the same background. And once they closed that place down, they all went on to different things. I'm one of the few guys that stayed on Long Island. And because I work shift work, it's very hard to get any kind of normalcy. Meetings are at Wednesday night. Well, every other Wednesday I'm working, so.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was on ship with you?
For a while, couple guys were in my wedding, but that, for maybe the first 20 years, I don't think I've heard from any of them. I used to get Christmas cards and stuff, but that kind of went away a couple years ago.
Do you think your time in the service, I kind of asked the question in a way, but it had an effect on your life?
Oh, definitely. In many ways, it's sad to say, it kind of defined what I was and what I was going to be and what I did for. I just had my 29th anniversary with this utility, so yeah. It's because of, let's say I became a torpedo man, okay? Well, there's not a lot of call for that in the civilian world. If you were if you ran a 105 howitzer, there's probably a few guys someplace that do that in the civilian world, but I had a, direct fit. In fact, they were, I can't tell you how many people with my background over the years the utility went through. I mean, so it worked out great for me. Couldn't have, having a limited formal education, I got into some, I ended up getting a federal license to run a commercial reactor, compensated accordingly, so I made some relatively good money for a guy from upstate New York with a high school education. No, I don't know if
No.
I grew up right around the corner from the Armory,
Mm-hmm.
you know. In fact, unfortunately, my mom passed away last year, and we had the funeral in Tunison's, which is right up on the corner. I used to play in Tunison's when the Tunisons actually lived in there. They had two sons who ran it for a long time. I don't know who's running the place now. But when I was growing up, I used to play basketball in a little parking lot they have next to the... And then...
Did you ever play basketball in the Armory?
Yeah,
It was set up with...
yeah. Played there quite a bit. We used to have... I was in the Boy Scouts, and they used to have their winter jamboree in the Armory, you know. And I was one of the few people in the county that could walk to it. And I had a paper route where I'd have to go pick up the papers at the Saratoga, which is,
Right
towards the other way. Yeah, that's my old stomping grounds there. From our back porch, you could see where they, at the time, I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the night that Kennedy made his speech, my dad was a shift worker. He was working, and my mom and I were home watching it on the black and white, you know. And if you looked out our living room window, there was a porch on the back of the house, and I could see all the trucks, which you never heard of all the trucks, you know, or maybe it was just my imagination. But it was a scary time, and you know, in my little world, that Armory was the military. You know, and I said, "Oh, they were all getting ready to leave. We're doing something here." I was 13 or 14 when that happened. But yeah, that's a small world. The real estate prices have changed a little bit up there too.
Oh, I guess so.
Yes.
Because the funeral director, that is not to get morbid here, but you know, my parents sold this house on Circular Street when I was, in fact, they moved when I was in college. I didn't even have a key for the house. A little hint of. So anyway, they moved to Greenfield, and eventually my dad passed away, and my mother moved in with my sister down in Charlton, Ballston Lake area, and so anyway, when my mom passed away last year, Tunison was always the people we went to for that kind of stuff. And where they laid her out, she was looking at our old house through this window, see? So then I'm telling the funeral director, hey, this is kind of strange, you know? He says, oh yeah, they just sold this house it was $525,000. No, it was a nice look. It was Victorian, you know, it was typical Saratoga. But that's like Long Island money.
Yeah.
It's beyond Long Island because there's no property. You know. Well, what's going on up there?
It's crazy. Well, why don't you turn that on? Okay, well, thank you. We're going to take